of that money appears to have made it into the hands of pro-Mousavi groups who have ties to non-governmental organizations outside Iran that the National Endowment for Democracy funds. So there we have it. It's no doubt that we're funding these people, including terrorists.
Absolutely, Doctor. And that's why your articles that we have links to up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com and up on Counterpunch.org and others are so important. But I'd like you to go back before you continue, and we've got one more segment with you after the news, and we appreciate the time. And it's this. On record, Cy Hirsch actually in 2004 wrote that U.S. forces were in there staging terror attacks. Special forces were on the ground, that they had 4 groups, 1 Kurdish, 3 connected to Saudi Arabia, the Sunnis, including the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. This is mainstream news. Blowing up mosques, bombing police stations. The Iranians have been suing the U.S. at the UN, saying that our government's staging this. And then the White House, as you mentioned, in 2007 puts out a press release bragging they're doing it. And then I'm watching people last night on Fox News. I'm going to play a clip up next segment. Lieutenant Colonel Bill Cohen bragging about how they need to torture people and invade Iran. Then he goes on Fox to run black ops on the American people and says, I'm angry at Obama. He's not supporting the overthrow in these great freedom fighters, knowing the whole thing's run by Bush and now still Obama. Cynical black ops behaving as if this whole thing isn't staged, while Al-Qaeda is attacking Iran when we're losing all our freedoms because of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, well, you've got it figured out, and I think there's so many dead giveaways. For example, Mousavi declared his victory several hours before the polls closed.
Ah, yes, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, see, this is classic CIA destabilization because it discredits a contrary outcome, and it forces an early declaration of the vote, because the longer the time interval between the preemptive declaration of victory and the release of the vote tally, the longer Mousavi and the CIA have to create the impression that the authorities are using the time to fix the vote. And it's just amazing to me people don't see through this trick.
Well, that's really a key point. And when I saw your article yesterday, I went and looked that up, and it's even in Iranian Press TV and BBC, you're right. Hours and hours before it was even completed, he was already declaring victory and saying he'd won by this giant margin. Yeah. How could he know to put out the false idea that then when he lost, it was a cheat? Yeah,
that's the way you work it. And there's some other telltale things. For example,
well, it's based on a color. That's what George Soros always does. It's mindless.
Alex, let me get
sorry, go ahead.
The point made. According to the Iranian experts that we have, there's no real difference between Mousavi and Ahmadinejad. And the notion this guy is a moderate is absurd because, look, first of all, there's no history of large-scale election fraud in the Iranian presidential races. If the mullahs don't like a candidate, they just kick him off the ballot. So if they were worried about Mousavi winning and didn't want him to win, they just wouldn't have put him on the ballot. Who gets on the ballot is up to the that council, that small council of mullahs, to choose. And so obviously they didn't have any objections to him. And when Khatami, a liberal reformer, ran for president, the entire conservative establishment absolutely hated him. But they did nothing about it. He won both of his races. And if they don't cheat against a liberal outsider like Khatami, how in the world would they cheat against a pillar of the establishment like Mousavi? So the whole thing is, I think, that Mousavi got disgruntled. The CIA knows how to manipulate disgruntled people, and they're using him to discredit the Iranian government. I don't think they'll be able to topple it because it seems to be mainly westernized youth in Tehran making these protests. But whether they topple or not, they've won because they will have discredited the Iranian government. The Ayatollahs thought this election would increase the the foreign legitimacy of the regime. Instead, it's decreased it. So now Obama has a reason to say, well, we were going to do diplomacy, but it's failed. Look, they're crooks. They steal elections. And there's nothing left but sanctions and the military option. And John Bolton told, according to the London Telegraph, who printed this.
Hold on, got a break. We'll come back after the news. I got to interrupt you, and we'll get to this. Incredible info from Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, laying out every piece of information. This is completely staged, folks.
Now live from Austin, Texas, here's Alex Jones.
That's right. It's syndicated across the nation, from Los Angeles, California to Miami, Florida, from Chicago, Illinois to Austin, Texas. I am Alex Jones. Final hour, your calls, and a lot more straight ahead as we chronicle the out-of-control tyranny of the offshore global crime syndicate known as the New World Order. All right, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, again, head of policy in the Treasury Department for Ronald Reagan, former Wall Street Journal editor, syndicated columnist, author of the new book. It's now out in the second edition, The Tyranny of Good Intentions. I interjected some of that last segment. So in this final segment, the 10 minutes we have with you, can you recap all those incredible points? And then you were getting to the punchline with Bolton, the Bush's ambassador to the UN, bragging. And I noticed Dr. Jerome Corsi, who I've interviewed, suddenly didn't want to attack Iran a few years ago. He said, oh, no, we're going to overthrow it with these great young people. And so, yeah, they're pretty public about this.
Yeah. Listen, let me just give some more information, then I'll try to...
Sure, go ahead.
All right. The London Telegraph reported on May 16th, 2007, that they had an editorial meeting with John Bolton, the neocon warmonger in the Bush administration. And the Telegraph says that Bolton told them that a U.S. military attack on Iran would be a last option after attempts to foment a popular revolution had failed. So it's quite clear that this is the American hand. I think it's also clear that some of these young people are very sincere. They're secularized, they're westernized, they're trying to free themselves from the Islamic moral codes so they can be like teenagers and young people in the United States. And so, but they're being, they're serving the CIA's purpose. They're going to end up with a puppet regime like they had before when we installed the Shah. Now, I also have an email from one of these, hacker, spammer, knowledgeable type people, and he said that he was struck by the sudden appearance of 30,000 Iran-related tweets, in this Twitter thing they have now, that just suddenly jumped up, and he looked into it, and this is what he found, that each of these news sites had created their Twitter accounts on Saturday, June the 13th. Each had an extremely high number of tweets since creating their profiles. Iran election was their most popular keyword. They were posting in English. Half of them had the exact same profile photo, and they each had thousands of followers and only a few friends, and their friends were each other. So he looks into this. He narrows the spammers down to 3 of the most persistent and does further research. He finds, for example, that within hours of the 3 of these new Twitter, whatever they are, originating, that the Jerusalem Post has a story about them.
Oh.
They've been up merely a few hours, and already the Jerusalem Post is writing a story about them. So he concludes, from the way the whole thing was structured and all, that all of this Twitter is an Israeli operation designed to put out more disinformation and get young people all over the world behind the overthrow of the of the regime.
And we know the United States did that in 1953 with the British the exact same way, but by staging terror attacks and claiming the elected president, Mohammad Mossadegh, had attacked the Muslim extremists. So last time they manipulated the Muslim extremists into overthrowing Time magazine, poet, liberal, throwing Mossadegh out. This time they're going to use the liberals to throw the mullahs out.
That's the plan. And you see, and there are splits among the mullahs. For example, Ahmadinejad is reported by the lying Western media to be some kind of a right-wing guy that's in thick with the mullahs. Well, the fact of the matter, he has spent most of the recent presidential campaign campaigning against the corruption of the mullahs, particularly the one he beat in the last election, this Rafsanjani, who is Mousavi's main backer. So